This is Gavin Hawk, and you guys are listening to what is this podcast again?
All right, so we're just going to jump into it like we do every week. Welcome to another episode of the Bladeology podcast. I'm Jeremiah Burbank from PVK Vegas.
Nick Chuprin of NCC Knives.
And Elijah Isham of Isham Blade Works.
Gavin Hawk here from Hawk Knives.
Grant Hawk, the other Hawk from Hawk Knives.
Awesome. So as you can tell, we have some very cool guests on this week. We are happy to have Grant and Gavin Hawk on with us. Let's go for it, guys. Give us a little update. You just did a Deadlock drop. How did it go? How are we doing?
Let Gavin, do that, Gavin.
It went great and terrible at the same time. We were trying to get away from PayPal because PayPal originally had a terms of service that restricted Switchblade sales. Which, of course, now they've changed. So now their terms of service, I don't know, it's some ambiguous sentence, something about, according to applicable laws, weapons are outlawed based on applicable law. And so, anyways, I called them for a clarification of that, and they said, yeah, Switchblades are fine. Just make sure you... as long as they're being sold from a legal state, being sold to a legal state. So, anyways, going forward, we're going to go back to using PayPal. But anyways, this last drop, we used credit cards for the first time. And so in the first 15 minutes, our fraud detection filters kicked into place because our hourly velocity was too high, which then stopped people from being able to purchase. And then the cart got overwhelmed besides the credit card companies. And so we sold the majority of them in about 15 minutes. And then, everything crashed, all sorts of problems. Emails started flooding in, calls started flooding in. They couldn't get their cards to work. We finally, maybe 15, 20 minutes later, we got it all on track. I think most people gave up by then. And we did finally end up selling out, but it was just a total mess. And we had people that would not give up. And they entered I have one guy, he entered in his card information 50 times.
Oh, wow.
Dang. Wow.
He was declined 40 sometimes and then approved the remainder. And that was kind of the theme of the night, is people just entered their credit card information over and over and over, getting denied and then finally being accepted. So we had people that ended up putting, 5 or 8 deposits down that we had to go back,
that's crazy.
cancel their orders, because we had a 2 per person limit. And anyways, it was a total clusterfuck. And we're done using credit cards.
Again, I can relate, because on my first pre-order, I did the same thing before the PayPal was fully integrated to the website. It was just credit cards, and I had the same issue, because it's like, your normal ratios of what you go in a day, and all of a sudden you get a lot at once. And I had the same thing. It's like, we have to check in on your system. It's like, we got to make sure it wasn't fraud. It was a pain in the ass back then as well.
Yeah,
Similar thing.
I'm sure there's a few customers out there that tried to purchase and didn't follow up with us. So I apologize to all the people that are listening to this that thought they were going to get a Deadlock and were declined.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's an unfortunate, but at the same time, you sold out. So, I mean, that's, that part's good.
Yeah, it all worked out in the end. And so by the time we went through all of the orders and the people that either actually wanted to, or they emailed us and followed up and said they tried to purchase and couldn't. Yeah, we got them all sold. So
that's it.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what batch is that again? Remind me.
That is batch 7.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. So that design has been it's been good to you guys. That's been a proven seller. It's an awesome knife, and it's kind of a cool segue because it's a dual action out the front knife. You guys are kind of known for being knife wizards. You could come up with these amazing mechanical designs. And so how did we get to the Deadlock exactly? What number design is that, or how did we get there? Let's go back a little bit into the annals of history, if you will.
Well, I think in the beginning, Kershaw called us and asked us if we thought we could design an out-the-front auto, and so we decided to give it a whirl. And I think we spent, I don't know, we might have flittered away, almost a year fiddling around. It was kind of part-time.
Yeah, part-time designing was about a year.
But anyway, we drew up designs, and I had these ideas in mind, and just couldn't get it to work the way we wanted it to. And before we actually, we never did, on that first design, we never did find one that we liked. And before we got done agonizing over it, Kershaw called and said they'd changed their mind, that legal had advised them not to get into it anyway. And so that's been, 6 or 7 years ago, I guess.
Roughly, yeah.
And so we kind of gave up, and then thought about it for a year or so in between everything else there is to think about, and started over again. And that time it started to look promising. We just worked on the mechanism only with more or less crude prototyping the mechanism more than anything. And we finally felt like we were closing in on it and tightened up the design and one thing another. The principle, I think, kind of came from a mechanism that's used in an aircraft fastener, where you have a pin that has 2 balls or 1 ball maybe that sticks out at the end, and when you press on a button, it releases those balls and allows that pin to be withdrawn. So it's used to hold, different covers closed and one thing another. And so we kind of used that principle of the ball locking mechanism. And we were trying to get a mechanism that would work without any drag at all from the time that you trip the blade, whether it's opening or closing, that the blade should travel completely free without drag of a spring-loaded lock waiting to engage at the end of its travel. And so that was kind of key to the design, is that we wouldn't trip the lock until the blade had reached the end of its travel, going in or out. And so to do that, we put a trip at the end of the travel that wouldn't engage the lock until the very last moment. And so we exploited that as far as we could go. And then when it started to look promising, then we tried to figure out how to get all of that inside of a knife. Seems like something that we run into a lot, because we have mechanical designs with lots of parts, is that everything wants to occupy the same space. And so then it becomes a challenge of getting all of those features to work within some kind of a compact three-dimensional space, which is always the challenge. But anyway, it went very slow. It took us a long time. I think we worked on that for over a year before we started to feel like we were going to be able to pull it off. And then as we got into it and started making them, we discovered problems. We built a contraption here in the shop that automatically opens and closes the knife. It has a sensor on it that tells how many times it counts it, how many times it opens and closes, and how many times it tries, which is not always the same. So we built the machine, and then we put our test prototypes on it and run them till they croaked, until they failed or not, and then would take them apart and study the mechanism, try to figure out what went wrong, make corrections, run them again. So we have an awful lot of time just in R&D, which I've come to believe means wreck and destroy.
That's
I'm
great.
gonna start using that. Now, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I had a question. When you guys started designing the Deadlock, was that a design concept right from the start that you wanted it to have no blade play? Because until now, that hasn't really been something that's been achieved.
Well, and that was the main focus in the beginning, because for that exact reason that it hasn't really been done, and it's always been hard for me, and I think a lot of others, to take out the front autos seriously, because blade wiggles all around. And so I think a lot of people have kind of turned their backs on that style of opening because, again, hard to take serious. So we started off with that in mind. Even in the beginning, with trying to design something for Kershaw, they didn't ask for that, but we asked ourselves of that. And so that was the main goal from day one. How to do it was never very clear.
And that's why we abandoned the first design. It worked. We could get the blade to shoot in and out, but there was always a little bit of blade play, and so we abandoned the whole system, and then later came back to it with a whole new, fresh perspective.
Right. I mean, I hear Grant describing the mechanism. I've opened, I think, each iteration probably except for the first one. I mean, I have a pretty strong understanding of mechanisms, but what is intriguing about the one on the Deadlock is the zero drag thing, which I think gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah.
Which is that the movement just sort of flows inside the knife. So once the blade is in motion, there's nothing pulling against it. It's not, that's a tricky one to try to describe to people, but it's really important because it keeps all the momentum into the locked position, into the open and locked position.
Yeah, and sometimes I think of it as like a bow and arrow, and so you shoot the arrow from the bow, it doesn't touch anything until it hits the target, and so that was what we were trying to achieve. So the blade is completely flying free in its raceway all the way to the very end, and then at the very end it trips a mechanism that then engages the lock, so that it's free flight over the entire travel.
So if you think of other OTFs, they all the lock is already in position. The blade hits the lock, pushes it out of the way. The blade goes past the lock, and then the lock engages. And so that moment where it pushes the lock out of the way,
right,
is what kind of slows it down. And so the way they compensate for that is having a really strong button or strong thrust springs to be able to overcome that lock. And so we can actually go really, really light on our spring pressure, but people really wanted them stronger, and so we're stronger because of that, not because they're needed, but we're still a lot lighter than all of the competition. And so that's why when you handle a Deadlock and play with it, it feels really smooth and easy to operate compared to other OTFs.
That's the one thing I've noticed, like especially, is like how easy it is to actuate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like one of the best selling points.
Yeah,
sure.
It's not something we put at the forefront of it because of course the no blade play is the big deal. But coming in second is it's just smooth and easy to operate.
Yeah, you're not destroying your thumb.
Right.
having to open the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my big surprises with the deadlocks was 'cause I kind of followed the build from the very first batch. I believe I seen the first batch ones, the one that Levon had, because it still had the rubies in it.
Correct.
But
Mhm.
we're just following your progress, seeing the photos and the videos you made on it. It's very like you look at batch one and batch four, whatever, however you did it. A lot of the outside profiles almost all look the same, but internally, I'm surprised how like you on some of them it's like almost an entire redesign.
Yes.
Like I
yes,
remember
it is.
the first one was like a circular cutout with almost like a dovetail key system almost, if I remember right. And then like the recent one's kind of like an L cutout now, and they're a little different. I mean, they're quite a bit different actually on the blade end.
The most recent mechanism is by far, I think, the best. I mean, looking at that, it makes the most sense.
Mhm.
Well, the goal is always to improve.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to touch up on the deadlocks? Because we kind of skipped ahead to modern day. I wanted to talk about kind of your past, because like when I found you guys, I was still a collector at the time before the Instagrams, and like I owned the Kershaw Ram, the Sheepdog, I think that one that had the carabiner slash like push thing at the bottom,
The ET.
the ET, yeah,
Yep.
that one. I had both of those, but you know what drew me over to your knives, and I was still a collector was. You look at folders, it was always a assisted opener or a thumb stud, a flipper, or a hole, but then always you saw the name Hawk Knives, and it was always some neat mechanism. It was never just like, oh, it opens. It opens with a caveat or something like that.
Yeah, I think the only thing really to add on the Deadlock is to expand on what you were mentioning before, is just the evolution of the design. And so, yeah, we came up with that original prototype, and the goal was, let's make this thing lock up solid. And we did it in a very complicated way. There's a lot of parts in there in those first 14. And then from there, we kept refining the goals for each new generation. And so, I don't know, I'd have to go back and look at my notes now. I think a lot of it I would mention when I dropped the next batch, but it was definitely from the prototypes to the first generation was just eliminating parts, trying to make it easier to manufacture, and then down the list to designing it so that the user could take it all apart without worrying about springs flying all over the place, making it smoother, and so each generation had a design goal of the mechanism to improve it in some way or the other, to where we are now, which I haven't made any changes from batch 6 to 7. Everything stayed the same, and so I think we finally figured out the best way to make it.
Now, how many design batches did you actually change up the design? I guess if you only said 6 to 7, so about 6.
Yeah, I think we've had probably 8 generations, and I should have. At the time, I wasn't thinking about it, but I should have wrote, what generation each knife was as I went, because we had. There was a couple versions where halfway through the batch, I changed my mind and started making things differently, because I would get to assembly, and the first 15 went great, and then all of a sudden I was starting having issues with a certain component, and so I'd re-engineer it, and then all the knives after that would have the upgrade, and so but every batch up until 6 was different, and then there was one batch that had a switch right in the middle of the batch.
So, and you also, to be noted, you have applied and have a patent on that mechanism for the Deadlock.
Correct.
Just the patent issued in record time. We've done, I'm not sure how many, quite a few patents, and a lot of them, especially the early ones, we had to fight tooth and nail to get a patent done and argue with a patent examiner and so on. And on the Deadlock, they took it as is, coming out of the chute, no changes. We got a letter from the patent office that said they were accepting it as is, and their research, they could find nothing even resembling what it is that we were doing, and so we were home free. That was the first patent that we muddled through without a big battle at the end.
Because they generally will come back and say, oh, well, we found these hedge trimmers that have this feature, and we found this pull cue that also has this feature, and it's pretty
OTF
obvious.
hedge trimmers.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious to us. If you combine a pull cue and these hedge trimmers, that you get this design, and so therefore we're not going to allow you to patent, this part of your invention, or
Wow.
this is obvious, and it's always annoying and generally pretty frivolous, but yeah, in this case, like my dad said, there was none of that. They just said, yeah, okay, good job, that's pretty impressive, here you go, here's your patent.
Wow.
And that process generally takes patent pending can be up to about 5 years.
Ooh.
Wow.
And we've had several that have gone 3 or 4 years, and the deadlock was 6 months.
Yeah, it was really quick, a quick turnaround. It waits in line for an examiner to look at it, and then that's when the trouble starts. But in this case, the examiner didn't have it in hand very short time, and we got a letter from the patent office that they were issuing the patent, accepting it as is without changes.
Interesting. I should talk to that
Wow.
guy. Huh.
Huh.
So, I hate to go on a tangent. How many patents do you guys have?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
Too many to count, that's for
Okay.
sure.
I think, well, and so the very first ones I did all by myself, which was a major pain. I had no idea in hell what I was doing, and I just muddled through it. The very first patent was for a shock-absorbing stop pin. And anyway, I ended up having to talk to the patent examiner on the phone, and he shot down every theory I had until I discovered that there's a little-known provision in patent law that says if an individual inventor is having trouble writing a claim to cover his patent, and if the examiner thinks that there's an invention in there somewhere, that the patent examiner has to write the claim. They're required to write one claim, because no matter how many claims I wrote, which is the part of the invention that you're claiming as your property, no matter how many I wrote, they shot them down on one feature or the other. And so I brought that up with the patent with the patent examiner, and cited the rule, and he agreed. So he wrote the claim, and I think there were a couple of dependent claims that went with it on the very first one. Later, as we got into it, we had done collaborations where patent attorneys, for example, working with Kershaw, took the patents over and did the patents. We waded through the first 2 or 3, mostly by ourselves. And then we started working with a patent attorney, which was a big help. But we do all of our own drawings, and I write the entire patent in the text here. And then I send it to the patent attorney, and they go through it and find the problems and redline it and send it back, kind of like submitting a thesis to a professor or something. And so they polish it up, and then that's where we go. So that's really the way we do it now. We do it all ourselves, then we give it to a patent attorney to make the corrections, and that's worked out well, and it saves an awful lot of time and money in patent attorney fees.
Yeah, there you go. I imagine at this point, if you've got so many patents you don't remember, then I had to streamline that a little bit.
Well, it's probably around a dozen.
Okay.
It's not like it's in the hundreds or anything, but I think we have around a dozen patents.
Now, this might be a private question, but like roughly, what does it cost to get something actually patented?
It depends on, like, greatly on what you're going to get patented, right?
Well, and so there's a big difference in the way we do it, and maybe just walking into a patent attorney's office and say, I have this idea, will you write me up a patent? And so I'm going to guess here a little bit, but like on the Deadlock, for example, if you had just taken some sketches in or an idea, pencil drawings and one thing, and gave them to a patent attorney, you could probably expect $15,000 to $20,000 in patent attorney fees. The way we did it, by doing all of the drawings here, writing all of the text, and only asking them to do corrections, it's probably in the neighborhood of $2,000, $3,000, something like that.
Oh, that's a big difference. And for some reason, I've always kind of assumed it was like about 15 to 20 grand. So I was pretty close there, I guess. But
yeah,
I've never really asked anyone or about it. I was just always curious. Like, there's a guys that get stuff patented, and I'm like, are you gonna make that many that was worth patenting? And 15 to 20 grand is a big investment if you don't know how to write up yourself.
Yeah, well, and it's hard because there's always a difficulty between the inventor and the patent attorney in communicating exactly what it is that you're patenting. And with some experience behind us, we became more aware of the pitfalls and how to write the text. And I don't know, I studied patent law a lot, and so that all helped. And reading other patents, which is something you end up doing a lot of. But just it's like a language of its own, and the words have special meanings only known to patent law. And so using the right words in the right places becomes important, and still we get corrected a lot. I'll write the text for a patent, and the patent attorney will, again, they'll redline our work and send it back and say, well, this should be phrased that way, this word should be used instead of that word, and a lot of little details like that. So we still rely on a patent attorney's experience and state of the art and so on.
Yeah. And if you were to do the patent yourself in its entirety, the filing fee is like $500
yeah,
or
$500 or so. Yeah, and then a few other fees, but that's not a lot. It's not the filing fees that it costs.
Right.
It's the patent attorney's time, and they get paid a pretty fancy wage, and so it adds up in a hurry. And then when you factor in the lack of communication between what the inventor is trying to say and what the patent attorney is trying to understand what you're saying, then there's a lot of back and forth, and all that keeps the clock running, and that's what runs the bill up.
Right. Yeah, those attorneys, they tend to charge by the hour.
Yeah, I think ours, what the hell is it, $450 an hour or
something like
nice.
that.
Yeah, so you want to choose your words carefully.
Right.
Well, and they break that down into 10-minute segments. So if you send them an email, then you get a charge for it. So you just got to be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Right. So now, Grant, you said that so the first patent you applied for, that was just you. You were on that patent by yourself.
I think so. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that. How did you get into this? How did knife making and knife designing? What year was that patent filed? How about that?
I don't know if I remember. I started making knives in the mid '90s. Gavin was pretty young yet and going to school, and I had been in gold mining for quite a few years, a long time, and about it. Well, actually, in the early '90s, the price of gold dropped seriously. I was making mining equipment. The demand dropped for the equipment. I had a lot of holdings in mining properties that were suddenly worth much less and so on. And so I was just actually looking around for a way to make a living without, we live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. And so I wanted to be able to work here. And I had kind of a shop set up that I'd been making mining equipment in. And so, I don't know, I was just experimenting with things and thumbing through a knife magazine somewhere and got interested in looking into it. And at one point, I suggested to Gavin, and again, he was probably 10 or
11,
something,
Yeah.
and suggested that we go to Eugene and go to a knife show. And so we drove over there and we spent the whole, 3 days wandering around the knife show and talking to the knife makers and talking to customers and trying to get a feel for it. And when we came back from that show, we talked about it in the car, but I just felt like that was an arena that I might be able to compete in. I'd never been a knife enthusiast like everybody everywhere. I've always had a knife and used a knife and lived outdoors for a good deal of my prospecting and so on. So anyway, it just looked like something that was doable, that we could do. I didn't have any real machine tool. Well, I guess I did have an old mill that I had used in the mining equipment, but I was pretty much just kind of self-taught as I went along and bought old rickety machine tools and brought them home and patched them up and made them run and just tried to figure it out step by step, how to make something that somebody might buy. And so the very first knives were fixed blades, and they were kind of a cowboy design because I'm also kind of a cowboy. I was raised on a range. And so those went well. People liked them, but they were really hard to make. Had an awful lot of time in them. And then as Gavin got older and he started doing shows, and I think that I noticed somewhere along the line that a big attraction for knife buyers was unusual mechanisms. And so I started to focus on how to make an interesting knife and less on how to make another knife that does the same old thing that all knives do. I remember seeing a knife in Eugene that had quite an effect on me. It was, and I don't know what it was now, I don't remember the name, but it was made in Germany. And they had an example there, and then behind the table they had a drawing that was probably 3 or 4 times scale, a cutaway drawing of how this knife worked. And so when you pick up the knife, you can't figure out how to open it. But if you look closely, there's a little crank handle that was inserted into kind of an inlay in the overlay of the handle. And so you pop that crank handle out, and then you plug the crank handle into a socket up near the blade, and then you rotate the crank, and that cranks the blade from closed to open. Totally, completely impractical way to make a knife.
Oh.
However, it attracted a crowd, and everybody was amazed. And the knife, I don't know if I remember the whole story, but it was for sale for something just a little south of 10 grand. And
wow.
It was a totally impractical knife, but very well made, but quite a curiosity. And so with that, I convinced myself that the curiosity factor mattered. And again, that might be a point of focus where we might be able to bring something original to mechanical knives. The ET uses a toggle mechanism that I don't think has been used on knives before that. But it's well known in the mining industry, for one thing. That's how a rock crusher works, is with a toggle mechanism. It's how the German Luger pistol locks up, and it's used in injection molds machines that holds the dies closed. And the toggle mechanism has a lot of interesting advantages. And so the ET was an adaptation of the toggle lock principle to a folding knife. And that kind of put us on the map. That was the first collaboration with Kershaw and our first real exposure to more or less mass market. And so I think we've kind of exploited that niche all the way along, adapting known mechanisms from other industries into folding knives.
Wow. I mean, I think that the Luger thing I didn't really until thinking about it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually.
Yeah, the toggle on the back of it that actuates the mechanism. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
I love how your guys' designs like pretty much branch completely from the mechanism, and then you kind of work out from that. Like not aesthetically at all. It's like completely mechanism based. That's pretty cool.
That's right. And so I don't know. I may not be much of a designer. I don't know, but I start with the mechanism, particularly in those early designs, and try to get all of that to work, and then draw a line around it, and that's the handle. And so some of them are a little clunky looking, but then they have kind of a character of their own as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a breath of fresh air for sure, because so many knives are, frame lock flippers. It's like it's pretty boring seeing the same thing over and over. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are like doing pretty much anything new, like every time you make something, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, well, that's been kind of the fun of it, is to try to put those two worlds together, the world of mechanisms in general and knives in particular.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a mechanism that you're particularly fond of? That you
like one over the other?
We're fond of the
no,
the
is
Deadlock.
that like fun? Like that was probably would be the Deadlock. But is there any of the mechanisms that that's like your favorite that you wish would have been really in demand or something like that? Like one that was very unique and interesting.
Well, probably the most unique and interesting and that broke a lot of the ice for us was the ET. Because it was such a strange-looking creature, worked in a way that few people expected, and that kind of set the stage. I think it was a big leap. The lock before that was what we called the dog lock, and it was nothing radical. As a matter of fact, after we first started making it, what's his name?
Blackie
Collins. Blackie Collins called and said we were infringing on his patent.
Now, the dog lock was the Ram.
No, it was before that. It was a sliding bolt that was engaged by tracks between the two handle frames that was spring-loaded forward, and it worked almost like a door latch or something. But Blackie Collins was right. I knew so little about knives that I didn't even know that he had designed one. What was this?
The bolt action.
Yeah. So I guess that was called the bolt action, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He had designed a knife that worked on a very similar principle. Oh, wow. And so I agreed with him that we were infringing on his patent after talking to him on the phone and then looking at his patent. And so I called him back, and we negotiated a deal where we paid a royalty to Blackie Collins for the last, whatever it was, the patent had almost expired. I think it had less than a year to go. And so because we were already making on a very small scale, and we had entered into an agreement with Columbia River Knife and Tool. They were going to manufacture it, but the time that they would start manufacturing would have been after the patent had expired. So, talking to Blackie Collins, we made a deal to pay a royalty on our knives we made here in the shop up until the time that the patent expired. And then by the time Columbia River came out with it, it had expired and there were no royalties due. But I kind of learned my lesson there about paying attention to not trampling on other toes, and gave me the notion that the designs needed to be more radical than that. And so, I don't know if it was exactly the next one, but I think the ET came right after that, didn't it?
It was the Toad came next.
Oh, the Toad. Okay. Well, and the Toad it was actually a toggle lock as well, but configured entirely differently and harder to make and a little harder to use. But it had a good following just because it was so interesting and so off the wall. And then after that, came
the Toad
the
with the
ET.
2 dump studs, right? You had a recent custom that got lost. Well, not recent, but
Correct.
okay. I'm just trying to remember.
Yeah, it had a
the Toad.
de-locking stud that protruded from both sides of the handle frame.
Yep.
Mhm.
It was it was kind of tricky to operate well, but again, it developed a following just because of its uniqueness as a conversation piece. But the ET was a little bit more practical, and it was a little more in your face, and that it was obvious what was going on, how the mechanism worked, and so on. And so, again, that was kind of the design that launched us into knife world.
Wow. The Toad's the one with the actuator in the middle of the handle?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we came up with came up with a knife we've never made, the Catlock, or the Mechanical Marvel, as it later was called. And that used a toggle mechanism, but it had a level beyond that. It had a sliding button that would manipulate the toggle through its path, open and closed. So you would slide the button one way and it would open it, and you'd slide the button the other way and it would close it. And we actually took that to Gerber, and they thought it was great, except they would prefer to start with something simpler. So we isolated the toggle mechanism from that design and came up with the Toad. Gerber deliberated on it for quite a while and finally came back and said that it was just too complicated still, and they declined it. So then we started making customs, and everybody loved it, except that they couldn't tell how it worked, and so they would peek inside, and they're trying to figure out how this thing works. So we made a version that had some cutaways, kind of like a fancy gun, exposing the mechanism, and that was kind of like the show that stole the show. Everybody wanted to play with and look at the cutaway version, and so that after the first show showing that prototype, we designed the ET with the idea of trying to make the mechanism more exposed so you can see what's going on. And so that's what the ET is an exposed or external toggle mechanism.
That makes sense. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know what design I really like from you guys is like a standout? They're all great, but for me, the Kershaw induction. Yeah.
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 Chris,
I appreciate a hidden flipper tab, and you got a nice hidden flipper tab on there.
Yeah, it's funny because we didn't design the induction.
Really?
Yeah, I was trying to think, well, which one was that? I'm looking at Gavin. Did we design a knife? I forgot.
It's our mechanism, but it's a Kershaw design.
Well, hey, I mean, you had to pop that mechanism there and make it work, right?
Yeah, and so the flipper that you like like about it, that was in the RAM, and so they were essentially copying our geometry based
that's
off
the
the
one.
RAM design.
Oh,
That's
okay.
it. That's the one I'm thinking of because it had a hidden flip. Yeah, it had hidden flipper on it.
Yeah,
Yep.
the flipper was just rotated so far forward and it just barely poked out. But as soon as you started to engage the flipper, then it kind of exposed itself in
it becomes more proud, and then you can get more purchase on it.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, we all know what's truly your best design. It has to be the Kershaw Shuffle.
Yeah, right.
The Kershaw Shuffle.
He's making a joke.
Oh,
yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Was the RAM?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. So the Select Fire, which came before the Shuffle, is really popular. It's still popular, and I think Kershaw wanted to exploit that further, and so they came up with that Shuffle. And I don't think it did that well. I don't even know if they still make it or not. But the Select Fire is going strong to this day. It's
kind of an ugly thing, but
is it the show? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of homely looking, but it seemed to have struck a nerve. It looks like a tool that was made to be a tool instead of I don't know. It's not streamlined or anything.
Right.
But it performs the function. It works well, and it's done well for us. And how long have they been making that? 6 years, 7 years?
Yeah.
I think they still make the Shuffle. I feel like I saw one not too long ago at a store. That's why I got to mention it because it's something I see everywhere they sell knives at.
Okay, and it's the Shuffle. The Shuffle's the one that has its
the little bottle opener
and a little. Oh, it's the bottle opener one. Okay, I'm thinking of. They came up with so the Select Fire has a 1/4-inch driver that pivots at the rear, and then it has the 1/4-inch bits in the handle. And then they came up with a version that had a 1/4-inch bit driver that slid out the back. And then it had bits held in it somehow. So it was kind of an adaptation of the Select Fire.
Didn't you design it?
But we didn't design it, no.
Oh, okay. I was like, because you're like, the bits are in there somehow. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was an in-house Kershaw design. And I think they were just trying to expand upon that line and that concept of a bit driver and bits. But I don't think it did very well. So
the strong point on the Select Fire was that you had such a long reach with it when you opened that driver, and their competing design didn't really. And I think that was a big difference in how useful it is. If you're because when you need a screwdriver, not only do you need a screwdriver tip, you need a screwdriver shank. You need to be able to get in crowded, narrow places and run a screw. And so I think that's part of the reason that the Select Fire has hung on for so long and still doing well. Is because it's more useful.
I don't know if Jeremiah, if you know about this or not, but could you guys tell us about whatever happened to the 0650, the ZT 0650?
Yeah,
that's kind of a rare one. It's kind of like most people don't really know about that.
Yeah, and so that was during the transition of Kershaw making switchblades and then deciding they didn't want to make switchblades.
So Jeremiah, are you familiar with this knife?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so
it's pretty great.
Yeah, it did pretty good. So we had the 0650, which we always called the Combat Auto. That was our name, and then ZT had a special.
They use a number system.
Yeah, they had a number system.
Yep.
So, anyways, it became the 0650. They had that mechanism, and then just a push button mechanism that Tim Gallion had designed. And so the idea was they were going to test which one sold better, Tim's or ours. And I don't know, I think we were in a dead heat. And then and then they just changed philosophies at Kershaw and decided they didn't want to make switchblades, so they quit making all switchblades.
Yeah.
And
now
then
they're back at it.
And now they're back at it. I don't know. It was like 4 years ago they decided to start making switchblades again, but they did not bring back the crossfire mechanism, is what we call it.
It's a weird mechanism, right? It's got like 2 pins in the blade.
Yeah, and so it's an adaptation of the Hawk lock that the Ram used. But the idea on that one is that the safety was integral to the firing mechanism.
Okay.
So it would to fire it, the button moved in an L-shaped pattern. So when it's over to the left, it's locked. You push the button over to the right, and then you pull back to fire it.
Right.
So it's like a built-in safety.
So it's a built-in safety. So you don't have to release the safety and then press a button.
It's one fluid movement.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
And so we made a few customs that way. I guess, I don't know, two designs that had that. And then Kershaw actually did a collaboration with Emerson, and they did, I don't know what the heck it was called, but they did an Emerson Auto.
Commander or something, wasn't it?
I just don't remember.
Maybe I'm not right.
But anyways, they made a run of those through Kershaw for Emerson that had our crossfire mechanism in it, and those are even more rare.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Huh. The fluid movement thing is that's the trick. That's a neat mechanism. There are certainly very very few autos like that that you see, which sort of bridges. Have you always been interested in making switchblades? Is that just part of like you saw that as part of the knife realm, or were switchblades something that you sort of avoided for a while?
I don't know if we consciously avoided it or not. Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was just kind of considered another way to make a knife, but we didn't really pursue it too much. We didn't really get hot on autos until we started trying to figure out how to make an OTF that would lock up tight. And then we put a lot of steam into an automatic knife from that point forward. But
well, and I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with being able to innovate in that realm. And so, like, we've made very few fixed blades just because it's hard to come up with an invention with a fixed blade. And then the autos that we started with one that we could add some type of innovation, which was the crossfire mechanism. And so we did that. I don't know. We did 2 or 3 designs that way, and then, we just got distracted with other inventions that kind of pull us away from auto. So it's less about an auto versus non-auto or flipper. It's how can we put an innovative mechanism in it. Okay.
Wow. I mean, that makes sense. It is tough to innovate on a fixed blade. There's not a whole lot of room to wiggle there.
Nope.
So where does that? I mean, the mud though. But the mud mechanism is logical because it really is just you add a spring to it.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So what design came after the 0650?
Ooh, that's tricky. Let's see. So we had the mud knife and then the 0650.
Oh, the mud was okay, right? Yeah.
That was about the end of our working with Kershaw, and so the next design probably would have been the Straplock that we designed for Buck.
And
we call it the Straplock. They called it the secure something.
It's already a worse name.
Yeah.
Just okay.
I don't remember what they called it. But the name of the knife was the Marksman.
Their
It's got that
name.
That's
that
their
back
name.
spring on it, right?
Yeah, so the idea there was it has a similar to the old stiletto switchblades, the
Oh,
Italian
wait.
switchblades.
I had one of these.
Yeah, and so we
Oh.
took that mechanism and converted it
It's
into
a pick lock.
into a
Okay.
flipper. Yeah, it's a pick lock, right?
Okay.
And so the strap adds tension to the blade tang for a flipper, and so then you flip it open, and then it's also the lock. The downside of those old pick locks is that they wear out over time.
They kind of chew away at the interface.
Yeah, right. And so that's why almost all the old autos like that have blade play in them. And so our innovation there, besides turning into a flipper, was adding an adjustable backspacer that moves the lock back and forth. So as it starts to wear, you can loosen the two screws and adjust a set screw and then tighten it back up, and now you have lockup again.
By the way, the lock was called SLS, standing for Strong Lock System.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
is custom.
That's so
Very
innovative and
inventive.
original.
Yeah, that was
Went
all
outside
them.
the box for that.
The pick lock is great. That sounds perfect. Or
Yeah.
strap lock. Yeah.
Now, I have a question. So the first knife that I got from you guys that wasn't a production design, it was a mid-tech. So I got the Beetle. Now, was the
Yes.
Beetle, that was the first time you guys used that mech, or did that like come from the ET?
No, that was the first time we used that. So it's so the ET had, of course, it locks. Later, we adapted the ET to a non-locking version, which was the grip lock that Boker made. But both of those are toggle mechanisms. The Beetle itself is it's just a link. It's just a loose link that's attached with the bungee, and so when you grip it, you're just holding the link into a locked face, and then when you release it, it's more of just a detent and it closes.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite knives because I lived in New York and I was like, I need something that's legal. It didn't technically lock. It had a high fidget factor. But
Yep.
like it sat around for like 6 months. I didn't open it, and the bungee got weak, and you told me just to bake it, and that worked. Like I still have it somewhere, but I can't find it.
Yeah, and then hopefully it didn't weaken again. I've recently discovered the real cause of why those bungees were starting to lose their memory, and so I have it on my every time I make my new to-do list, it carries over onto the new list. But I need to remake the molds for that and remake the bungees. I wasn't getting enough pressure when I was molding them, which related to density of the material, and so anyways, once I remake the mold, then anybody that has a Beetle, I'll send them a new bungee that should last.
Well, I was under the
Wow.
impression because when it's in the closed position, there was more tension on the bungee, so I just thought it was because it was under constant tension if you store it while it's closed.
Yes, and so it should have been, well, one, it shouldn't have been an issue, but since it was an issue, leaving it in the open position would be the best option.
Yeah, well, like I said, you just want to bake it. Baked it, it's good as new.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I got it was just too expensive for me to keep. I liked it. When you guys did the Microtech collab with the longer one.
Oh yeah, well, we called it the Tangent when we made it, and then Tony Marfione didn't like the name Tangent because apparently several other knife makers had made knives called the Tangent.
So then he went on a tangent why it can't be called a tangent.
Yes, exactly.
I wish I had the soundboard.
And then it was called the Axios.
Right. Okay.
Wow, that's a way better name.
Yeah, I had that one. It was cool, but the ones that they released in that first batch were all like Damascus. It was like $1,600. I'm like, I couldn't keep it at that time.
Those were pretty crazy.
Yeah, they were expensive.
There weren't too many of those.
There was 12 of them.
Oh, there you go.
They have 2 of them, and I have 1.
Hmm.
Yeah, they had them at what show did I get it at?
I got Tactical.
Oh, TKI.
TKI, yeah.
Okay.
No, I didn't get it from. No, I didn't get it at the show. No, I think Brady had them.
Oh yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
Monkey
Yeah,
Edge, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I remember because I was like, oh, this is seems like a lot compared to other customs. So I don't know if there was a secondary, but I bought it. I wanted to check it out, and I sold like a week after. But it was
hidden
definitely
flipper
cool.
goodness right there.
Yep.
Where that arcs back and then it like the way the flipper's integrated is pretty beautiful. I've never seen that on anything else.
I really like the Tangent. It's one of my favorite designs. I have a redesign of that that actually gets rid of the bungee and then turns it into a locking mechanism. I just haven't had time to get into it and make a prototype. The last 4 years have been all Deadlock.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So what about? I mean, we skipped over it, and I wanted to just jump back for a second. But the mud. So that because you did ZT had a folding mud that they did, and then you guys eventually would go on to do, I guess properly termed mid-tech of the mud.
We made the first mud, and then that was a collaboration with Kershaw with our design. And that actually relies on the same patent as the Ram.
Okay.
No, it's backwards.
Oh.
The mud knife is what we patented, and then
that's
and
right.
then the
Okay,
Ram
and then we used it for the Ram.
relies on the mud patent.
Yeah, it's the same patent that covers both of those.
Oh, that's tricky.
Yeah,
okay.
because we started off with the mud, just wanting to make a knife that couldn't be fouled by dirt, which is one of the big objections to any kind of a folding knife over any kind of a fixed blade, is that fixed blades don't get fouled by dirt and quit operating. And so the idea was to make a folding knife that would achieve that same end but still fold. And so the whole idea was that the locking mechanism should be entirely sealed from outside influences, dirt, sand, so on. There were a lot of reports of people having trouble with making things work when they were deployed to Afghanistan or whatever, or the first Gulf War, just because the sand was so fine and blew everywhere and fouled firearms and of course folding knives. And so the whole idea there was to make a folding knife that would work in spite of anything that you put it through. In our first design, when we first sold those at a show, we had a cookie tray full of wet sand and would demonstrate them by packing the whole knife with sand all over very fine wet sand, and you couldn't tell the difference. You could open and close it. It worked just fine. It pushed the sand out of the way, and there was no surfaces that were interfacing with each other that could be fouled by sand.
Oh, pretty cool.
No, I was going to ask, but you already answered the question. I was wondering when I saw the design before, like when I first saw it, I was wondering if it was designed for like a military contract or for the military in mind, just because
Well, and it was kind of, and they had kind of a military look to the first ones we made. The first ones we made were probably a little bit small, and then when Kershaw made their version, it seemed a little bit big. And so later on, we kind of zeroed in somewhere in between. And so it seems to be, it's still kind of a big knife, but it does accomplish the goal, which was to make a folding knife that couldn't be fouled by dirt and debris, and it performed well in that capacity.
Yeah, but I gotta say, the most military knife you guys have made, though, it has to be the Rock.
Yeah.
The Rock.
Oh, I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Black and OD green with the military, with the American flag kind of mill out in the blade.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah. So we came up with the Rock, and then that was the first, strap lock, pick lock that we did.
Oh, so that's a predecessor of the Marksman.
Correct. Yeah. And God, I remember machining those stars. God, they took so long.
Oh, it was
to
machine?
machine. Yeah.
I would have done it. That's because that's less than the 16th. I don't
No,
know
you
why.
could have EDM'd them.
I could have, I should have.
Yeah.
But at the time, EDM was expensive, and I had a machining center, and so I actually had to go in with, I think, like a 31 thousandths end mill, but I could only machine halfway. So because of the flute length on that little end mill, so I had to machine them halfway, flip them, and then machine all the way through. And
Damn.
it took a long time with that little end mills, but it looked cool.
Yeah, it's got
It looks awesome.
very-
It screams America.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah, that's I'm like, I remember they had a knife that just screamed America. I'm like, Googling. I'm like, oh, the Rock. Okay.
And also a hidden flipper.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that disappears.
Yeah.
So
we just really like that idea of having a flipper that's rotated far enough forward that once it's open, it kind of blends in with the profile of the knife, which is something that a lot of our mechanisms allow, but frame locks and liner locks and stuff don't really allow that because the flipper would be right where the lock is. And so we've always kind of exploited that in our mechanisms.
Interesting.
Can you talk about the orbit for a little bit? Like, did you guys design that and then collaborate on it with Surge in like a way, or was it like a complete design collab? Or?
It was more of a collab in the sense that he did the design and then we did the mechanism.
Gotcha.
And we massaged the design a little bit
to make the mech fit. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he sent over kind of the initial sketches of kind of that cleaver and handle style, and then as I integrated the mechanism into it, I kind of slimmed it up and changed things around a little bit.
Yeah, I love that thing. It's like the best fidget flipper. It's so easy to disengage.
Yeah, I really like it, and that I ended up designing a new detent system for that.
It's unusual for sure.
Yeah, everybody seemed to love it, and it has a very interesting feel to it.
Yeah, it's like the blade stops and then you press it in further.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of clicks in, and you can, of course, close it all in one sweeping motion. But yeah, it has a really interesting release to it. The trick behind that is other detents have a the way they work is you put your finger on the flipper and you start to build up kinetic energy by putting pressure on it, and then all of a sudden you get so much pressure it breaks the ball, the detent, and it flies out. The toggle detent instead has travel to it, so the blade actually starts to travel, and as it's moving, it's building up pressure, and then it releases at a certain moment.
So I'm guessing it's an arc going around the high point, and once it goes around the high point, it shoots it open?
No, it's more like a light switch. So as you're flipping the switch on a light, it gets harder and harder, and then right at top dead center, now it clicks over, and so that's what the detent does inside. Is it clicks over, and so when you close the knife, it hits it, and then it re-clicks it back into position. So there's a mechanism that's literally toggling from an open.
So that's how I was pretty much picturing it will go up. Okay. So another thing, I actually wanted to talk to you about this at Blade Show. Well, two things, Blade Show. One is, what the hell happened with your mill when the tool changer fell?
Okay.
Because that scares the hell out of me.
So it's a weird thing that doesn't happen very often, but on older hawsers, there's a logic failure when the shuttle arm motor fails and the limit switch that essentially gives feedback that the shuttle is either in or out fails. And when both of them fail at the same time, the machine doesn't know that the shuttle has not retracted out of the way. So it sends a signal to the motor, and the motor says, okay, well, I moved it, and the limit switch isn't working, and it says, well, there's not a shuttle here anymore, and the spindle
Went down.
just comes down, and it just rips the shuttle off of the...
Oh, okay. I've had something almost happen like that, but not really. It just kind of jammed up, and I had to do a recovery sequence.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what it's supposed to do. So that's if everything's functioning properly as far as the feedback system, it'll say, whoops, nope, there's an error. The shuttle hasn't moved in the allotted time, so we're not going to continue. But if both of those, the sensor and the motor, fail at the same time, it doesn't know what's happening. There is something that can happen that's more common, which is the rollers that the shuttle roll back and forth on. They have an eccentric on them that tighten them to the rail, and those eccentrics can come loose.
And they don't lock and they'll slide back.
Yeah, well,
that's what happened. Oh, because I had mine slid back.
Yeah, and so it'll slide back and forth, but what happens is it won't be on the rails tight enough, and so it'll jump the tracks, and then the shuttle will fall off.
Oh, okay. Mine still stayed on the machine. Okay.
Yeah, and that's generally what will happen. But if it gets loose enough, then yeah, it can just jump off the track, and then you've got a problem. So if you start hearing a really loud sound on your shuttle as it moves back and forth, it's because those eccentrics have gotten loose, and then you should tighten them up.
Yeah, because when I got my machine, the actual umbrella hood on the tool changer was bent, and whenever you could load a tool in. Whenever it went to the next tool, it'll hit the pull stud and just throw the tool out of the tool holder, and I had to use a car jack to bend it back up.
Oh,
I don't
right.
know I don't know what they did in moving. I thought I bought the wrong pull studs or what, and then I kept looking at photos and I realized it was bent. Yeah, that wasn't fun. So thankfully I didn't jack up the rails. Now, question 2 would be the story behind the tie lock.
More specific or just a general outline of the...
how did you guys come to working with Chris Reeve?
Yeah.
He's usually a guy, their company philosophy is kind of like they do the same thing and work within themselves. And
Chris, we've had a long relationship with Chris, and we've always wanted to do a design together, but it just wasn't quite the right project. And so... oddly enough, the tie lock mechanism was designed for the Select Fire multi-tool. And so the reason behind the mechanism was to get it out of the handle and put it on the blade so we had more real estate in the handle for tools and bits and things like that. Later, Kershaw decided that, one, it was too far out of the mainstream and people wouldn't be able to operate it or wouldn't buy it in a big box store, which is probably correct.
They also said that their company that they would have make it didn't think they could make it work.
Yeah, they didn't think it was possible to make that mechanism work.
I think just that fact inspired Chris Reeve, and he said, "Well, they can't make it work, but I can."
Yeah.
And he actually did most of the development. Our prototypes were admittedly sort of crude, and Chris Reeves seen that as a kind of a challenge, and he had been looking for an opportunity to instigate a collaboration, and that seemed to have sparked his interest. And so anyway, we pretty much, I think we did the design here mostly, but he did the development, which was a little tricky. But he figured it out and made it work, and it worked well.
I'd assume like tolerances and stuff like that to make the system work.
That's true. Yeah.
It was a hard knife to make, and I think that was ultimately one of the reasons they quit making it. Was just it was so difficult to make.
It looks simple, but it's hard to make work right.
Yeah, I was gonna say it doesn't look entirely complicated, but
yeah, it's just hard to pull off.
You got to get that press fit just right so it doesn't fall out in time. Also, if the heat treat, like I imagine, if the heat treat's wrong, putting constant tension on that area of the blade, it could snap.
Also, that spring tension, like, would have to be dialed in perfectly to lock up every time.
Yeah, everything's got to be right for that to work.
Yeah.
All those ratios have to fall into place.
Yeah, it was a complicated design, a little over the top.
Yes, what got me to remember mention that, I could be crazy, but I feel like I remember a really old interview you guys did about it 5+ years ago, and you guys were talking about how you guys were bringing him designs all the time, and he kept rejecting them, or you guys were trying to get him to pick up a design.
I think I know where you're going with this, Nick.
I don't know. Okay, good. I'm like, good thing I'm like not making this up.
I think I saw the same video. I think I saw the same video. No.
I don't even remember that.
Well, I think what you might be talking about is the first knives that I started bringing Chris Reeve, and we weren't to the stage where we could discuss a collaboration. But after the trip to Eugene and deciding I wanted to get into knife making, when I got back, I looked Chris Reeve up. He was the only knife maker in the local phone book in Boise. So I went and introduced myself and said I want to be a knife maker. And Chris says, yeah, well, join the club. Everybody wants to be a knife maker. And so he said, have you ever made a knife? And, well, no, not yet. And he said, well, go make a knife and bring it to me and show it to me. So I went home and made a knife, and I don't know, just really quickly. And it was, I forgot even what I made it of now. But
it was a file.
I think it was a file, and it had a stacked handle on it, hidden tang type thing.
Yep.
But when I took it back to Chris, he looked at it. He said, that's the worst knife I've ever seen. He said, this knife is terrible. And so he recommended a book, which I'd forgotten, but I had no idea even the basics of knife making. And so then, anyway, I read up on it and then started experimenting. And he gave me a grinding lesson one day, which lasted about a minute and a half, I think. He said, well, here's how you grind a knife. And so he whipped one out, and that's how you do it. Well, okay. And I don't think I even had a grinder yet. So somehow or the other, I think I bought a grinder at an auction somewhere. And anyway, little by little, we stayed in touch. And every time I made another knife, I'd bring it to him. And then one day, after I made that wacky design that we call it the cat lock or the mechanical marvel, it was twice scale, and so it's a great big thing, and I made it almost all by hand, and it had a very complicated mechanism that actuated a toggle. He recognized it as resembling a mechanism of some German machine gun or something. I forgot just what that was. But when I showed him that design, he just almost literally fell out of his chair. He could not believe that we would make something like that that would actually work.
First folder.
It was our first folder.
Okay.
And so anyway, that blew him away, and he started taking this more serious. And so from there on out, we took him every new design that we made, and he became more impressed as we went along, and then started talking about eventually a collaboration if we would just make something easier to make.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we finally got there. And it wasn't easy to make.
Yeah. It looked simple, but then it wasn't actually easy to manufacture.
Yeah.
So this mechanical marvel that comes up a few times. So what? I mean, where do we see that? Like it's just like hiding in the shop somewhere. Like you guys are just never gonna make it, or
we've never really. It's never been
us?
published or shown.
And so we've had the twice scale prototype for years, and we used to have it behind the table, and if you were lucky, we would bring you behind the table and we'd hunker down and we'd show you this contraption. And we did that for years, and that's how we became friends with a lot of knife makers.
Ken Onion was blown away when he see that.
Yeah, when we showed that to Ken, that was before he was famous. That instantly made us friends with him. And so it sat on the shelf for a long time, and then we actually made a prototype and took it to Blade 8 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
But it wasn't finished, and it worked okay, but it had just a couple of issues to it, and we were going to come back and refine those and start making it. I don't remember what was going on at that show, but it was kind of a lackluster show for us. We didn't get a lot of attention from it. And then right after that, we switched into the Deadlock development and never really got back to it. But there's one of the YouTube videos. It's the one that Blade HQ did on us. In that, we have we're going through knives in the office. We show the I don't know, version 2 prototype of that. We don't take it apart. We just open and close it. It has a dagger grind and a sliding button. And so if you
the sliding button is a lot like the OTF in a way. It's not centered, and the design is different. I mean, the look of it. But you push the button forward, and it mechanically propels the blade to open, and then you pull back on the same button, and it mechanically propels the blade to close.
Oh, wow.
And so if you pull the button halfway, the blade will be halfway, and then you can switch directions and close it again. It's pretty neat. It was, again, really complicated to make, and we made the second prototype, but we needed to go back and change a lot of things, and we just never got back to it.
The original prototype, is that the one with one side has an aluminum slab scale?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, cool. I remember seeing this. This is also the video I was referring to. It's the Blade HQ Mad Scientist Knife Maker and the Meet Your Maker. I gotta look at it. I gotta watch it again.
They show that?
Sounds very intriguing, for sure.
I don't remember.
Yeah, well, maybe so. I didn't think it had ever been.
What'd you call it?
The Mad Scientist Knife Maker, Grant and Gavin Hawk, shop tour.
I didn't even know about that.
I guess that applies, yeah.
I'm just gonna look at it real quick.
And they show you in the TP.
Oh yeah.
Well, but that was, let's see. And is that the one that was really a long video, or?
It's 18, like almost a 19-minute video.
Yeah.
Maybe we did take it apart in that video.
I guess that it was kind of like slab scale, and you see the mech.
Okay.
There was like no top scale.
The whole handle on the top side, I'd made it out of ebony, but with one little key you could turn, the whole handle would come off, and you could shake out the mechanism, the pieces, and then put them back in to show how it works. and so it had a mechanism that that directed the toggle through the path that would open and lock the blade, but it had to do it. It's really complicated. It had a sliding plate that had 2 cam tracks in it that drove 2 independent pins that were attached to the toggle, and they had to function at a 90-degree angle. At some point in the travel, it changed from one cam track to the other cam track, so as to pass over top dead center. It's complicated enough to look at. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, at first glance on video, it looks like a complicating lockback, but it's not. If you Google Mad Scientist Knife Maker Grant and Gavin Hawk Shop Tour Blade Issues video, it starts at like 11 minutes is where they bring it out.
Okay. Yeah.
If anyone wants to look it up and see what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, and maybe I was wrong. Maybe that cat was out of the bag.
Yeah, I haven't watched that video in so long. I don't really remember it.
Yeah.
God, that was in 2013.
Yeah, the mech looks like it's made
I
out of
remember
brass.
the day that came out. Yeah, watching that. It was pretty amazing.
So someday, I don't know. Right now, it's hard to even think about anything else except deadlocks. The demand for that is 100 times the demand of any other design we've ever had, and of course we've hired employees and bought new machines, and we're trying to make as many as we possibly can to satisfy a small percentage of the demand. And every time I think about, well, God, it'd be like the orbit, for instance. Boy, it'd be great to make a few orbits, and I think, well, I could also make a few more deadlocks. So
Yeah.
it's tough to be.
What you need is a tinkering machine. Not a small mill that you can tinker with.
Well, and I kind of do, but
The time is the critical part.
yeah, I mean, I can go prototype and get a toy to play with, but then how do I produce it without taking time away from the deadlock? And then I think, well, okay, I'll buy another separate machine, and I'll hire one individual person. They'll run that machine, and they'll make orbits or whatever it is. And then I come full circle again and say, well, I could also just have that person make more deadlocks. So it's, I don't know, we're kind of in a tough spot, and I don't know how we're going to, well, tough spot's the wrong word, but it's hard to solve that problem.
It's a good spot to be in, to be fair. I mean, if you're, people do forget that knife makers pay bills with knives. So I mean, if you're selling knives, that's good. That means you're in good business.
Yeah. I can't blame that at all. You look at it's like, oh, I like to try to do something else, but like I've developed the process is down, the employees know how to run it, and you got to make payroll. It's not when you start having employees, you don't just think about yourself now. You got to think about these people.
Right.
Employees. AKA your dad.
Yeah.
Okay. So, my dad's been full time for about 3-4 months. So it's the other way of your situation, but it's the same thing. I was like, I'm really wanting to stop making this design, but I'm like, I got all the fixtures made, the process is down. I guess I'll make one more batch so as I teach him how to make them, because I know this. I know I can make them and sell them, opposed to putting in R&D time into something else.
Yeah, and you come up with a new design, and people may or may not like it, and if they do like it, is the demand as strong as the design you're already making?
Right.
And for us, if we put our attention towards a new mechanism or a new design, it takes away from the current design. So I don't know. Hopefully someday we'll get to a point where we can go back and start coming up with new designs, and I don't know, I've come up with several mechanisms since the deadlock, but I can't even prototype them. But maybe someday.
I did just find the section of the video where you show that off, the insanity.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the first time I've seen it, and since I've seen the video like way back, and I totally forgot all about that. But yeah, that thing is pretty insane. You show it was like a clip of you actuating it.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very reminiscent, like the profile of the handle is very reminiscent of the Deadlock, kind of.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll have to go back and watch that.
Pretty cool though.
Yeah.
Oh, so that was the second version.
That's the second version he's talking about.
The second version. Yeah.
No, the first
we
version's
don't
at 11 minutes.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's that. It has like a half-inch aluminum scale.
Yeah.
It's kind of like exposed. It reminds me of like a watch movement.
So speaking of movements a little bit, the Deadlock, you posted a video right away and you said, look, this is what the mechanism looks like. You've made versions of your knives that have cutouts so people can see the mechanisms. You've made versions that are clear so people can see the mechanisms. It seems like you guys maybe can touch on some of the ethos behind being very open with how the knives work and how they're put together. Do you find that people just want to see it? Do you find that you want to display the work you've done? How does that work? Because I've talked to Gavin a little bit about that, but...
Well, it's part of the fascination, watching the mechanism go through its paces. So that's been kind of the motivation behind all those see-through designs.
And the Deadlock ships with a Torx driver, so you are encouraging people to take it apart.
Yeah. And Gavin did a kind of a little takedown video showing how it comes apart and goes back together. We've never made a transparent one, or with a clear view handle or anything. I guess we've talked about it, but we never quite got around to doing that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I encourage people to take it apart is because others discourage people to take them apart. And then the other part of that is, if you get something in there, you're gonna have to take it apart to clean it. It's not like you can just blow it out, and depending on what's in there. And so we specifically designed it so that people could easily take it apart. So might as well encourage them to take it apart and clean it. If somebody doesn't want to, obviously they just send it in, and I can do that for them.
Right. I mean, I think it's great that you guys encourage people to do it. I mean, people should be friendly with their gear, and certainly when it comes to a knife, no matter what kind of knife, you should know how to service it, be it an automatic or otherwise. And certainly OTFs, right, are gonna need servicing at some point. They all do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So back to the mechanical marvel. So Nick, the knife at 11 minutes or whatever, that's actually the very first prototype of the dog lock.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Huh?
Yeah. And then at 12:37.
Yeah, it's a little later in the video. Yeah.
I saw that one too. It just looked more complete. That's all I was like.
Yeah. And so that was the version 2 prototype that we had built. And the idea was we were going to make, some type of crystal lens there, or something so you could see the mechanism working. And
A magnification lens would be cool.
yeah, that'd be neat. Yeah. And then, like I said, we just got distracted and never got back to it. But yeah, that's the cat lock, which stood for cam actuated toggle.
Yeah, there's like 400 cams in there, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm
That's
pretty
what it
sure a
appears
lot of those
like.
are also kind of. Or is all that needed, or it looks like it could be slimmed down a lot?
No, those are all needed for sure. Because you're, it's tricky to explain without having it.
I'm looking at it just through a window.
Well, there's a sliding plate, and that sliding plate has 2 cam tracks on it, which are grooves cut to a specific shape that engage 2 different pins on the toggle, the long toggle, which is just a link. And so as you push that forward, it controls that toggle in all the directions it needs to go in order to open the blade and lock it. So yeah, there's no extra parts in there. They're all absolutely necessary to the working.
Wow. All right, at this point, I think we're definitely going to have to get an updated video of that. Maybe you guys can post that and.
Well, that would be amazing if
I wasn't making deadlocks.
well, no. So 4 or 5 years ago, I had a bag of prototypes that
Oh no, right.
that I lost, and that knife is in that bag. So
Wow.
if anybody ever sees that knife, that
It's ours.
It's
Where it
ours.
came from,
We
yeah.
want it back.
Right. Where was that? Was that in Vegas?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at USN. Yeah.
Oof.
I had it at my feet at a table, and we walked away, and I came back, and it was gone.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of cool old prototypes in there. Anybody that had known us in the past, we always had that bag on us, and so anytime after a show, people would come up, and I could go through the bag, all the different prototypes we had made, and yeah. So
I suspect it landed in the hands of a non-community or industry person at this point. If
I
it's
believe so, yeah.
someone probably picked it up and was just like, "What the heck is this?"
And it was a shame. They probably took it to a pawn shop and they laughed at them because
Mhm.
a lot of the unanodized aluminum,
Oh right, it's raw.
mild steel on a lot of the prototypes, so the blades were probably rusting, unsharpened. They were just quick, crude prototypes. So
Oh,
Oh,
damn.
that's a bummer.
That is a shame.
yeah, that was sad. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot like what happened to Ken a few years ago with his
Yeah.
whole Pelican case full of prototypes and knives for, I think it was a California show, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Every one of them got lost.
Stolen.
Yeah, absolutely stolen.
Stolen. Not lost.
Yeah. Yeah, at least his, I think they know where those are at, as far as my understanding.
Really?
Yeah. But these ones probably just got thrown in a dumpster or something because there's no monetary value to them after they had them.
Oh,
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
leave this
that's-
painful subject.
Yeah.
bonding greener pastures.
Yeah.
So there are some cool knives that we missed, or some cool ideas
let's
you want to talk
see.
about?
What did we miss? I think we hit all the designs actually, except for the very first fixed blades that we were making, the pony knife and the gal leg. Even those were kind of innovative in their own way. The pony knife had a pretty unique styling to it, but the interesting thing was that we were using horse hoof for the handles, and that kind of gave a really interesting look to it. It kind of looks like sheep's horn, but it's more unique and has a little bit more defined grain and more unique colors.
Horse hoof.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool. Nobody's ever copied us on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think I've heard that one before.
I don't think
No.
anyone knows where to get it.
Well, and so
Well, you kinda
we
need a
got
guy.
it. We got it from a rendering plant that takes dead animals, and it's out south of Boise, and so they ran a midnight shift there, and an all Mexican crew, and so people would take dead horses and dead cows and sheep and everything else, and they would cut them all up and skin them, and I guess they made dog food out of them and one thing and another. So I went out and talked to the company, and the guy said, well, come back at night and talk to the night boss, and he could save them for you, and just pay him. Don't bother paying us, and that can just be a perk for him. So we went, and I can't think of his name now, can you? Anyway, I went to the lead guy, and so he agreed to save the horse hooves. So we got them cut off at the knee or cut off at the ankle. And so then...
And this place was horrible to go to.
I
this
can only
is-
imagine.
Like,
Your
you
description
get-
already, it sounds
you're-
pretty crazy.
You're about a half mile away, and you can start to smell the stench of dead animals. And it's like this thick air, and you get to the place, everything's sticky. the floor, the concrete's sticky, the handrails are sticky. It just stinks. Oh my god, it was so horrible.
I'm not even thinking about the knives now. It's just the story behind it. It's like you guys pretty much had to go through that to get the material, and then you had to perform some sort of taxidermy to get it apart and process it.
Well, and so the way we did it is we bring them home and soak the hoof and the whole foot in vinegar for about a week.
Oh my god.
And so the vinegar adds a little bit to the smell. But what it does is it loosens up the hoof around what they call the coffin bone, which is the bone inside the hoof. And so then I invented a machine here.
It's like a medieval machine.
Yeah. And so it was on a stump, like a wood round. And so you could insert the hoof into it, and it had clamps that would hold onto the hoof, and then it had another leg that or arm that would bite the shin bone, and then you had a crank, and you turned the crank, and it would pull the coffin bone and the whole leg and everything out of the hoof shell. And it made a great big sucking sound when it came out. And then
I'm like reliving childhood memories right now.
Yeah, Gavin was doing this when he was a kid. That was one of his chores after school.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Hoof the leg.
Yeah. Wow. Get on my big rubber gloves, open the vinegar. Ugh.
I had an attorney friend come to visit once, and we were talking. He was watching Gavin pull these legs out of the hoof. He after a little bit, he said, "That's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life."
Wow. Now,
so
out of a hoof, how many knives was that?
Well, one. And so, so we would use one hoof and cut both halves out of it. So what we'd do then is, a lot of them had horseshoes on them, so we had to pull the shoes off, and then we'd saw them half in two, and then saw the floor out in the bottom of the hoof, the frog part. We saw that out, and then because it had been soaking in vinegar, it was soft and pliable.
Well, no, we'd re-soak it at that point.
And and so we would have to re-soak it, I guess. So it would get really soft soaking in vinegar. I'd read that trick about how people used to make powder horns. And when they would treat the steer horn that way, so that it would be so a round plug would fit it, because the horn is never quite round. So I borrowed that idea, soaked them in vinegar, and then we flattened them in a hydraulic press and squeezed them between some aluminum grates that I'd bought at the salvage yard, sawed them up and made little clamp systems that were about, a foot long and 6 inches wide. So we'd clamp them in there in a hydraulic press, and then put C-clamps on them to hold them and stack them up until they dried. Then when they were dried, we'd bandsaw out the rough shape, and we would send them off to Arizona, and they did a
K&G.
Yeah, it was K&G, wasn't it?
Yep.
So we sent it to them, and they would do a stabilizing process where they would inject a polymer into the hoof, which would stabilize it, and so that it wouldn't take on moisture and it wouldn't warp and shrink and everything. So went to a lot of trouble just getting the handle material just to be that unique.
Well, and then
so it's a lot of work.
The hoof,
pretty intense.
The hoof doesn't glue to steel, so
there's more.
So we'd have to glue with hide glue. We'd glue the horse hoof to ironwood liners, and then the ironwood we could then glue to the steel
with
epoxy, and then we'd pin it and do all that stuff. So if you ever find a pony knife, you'll notice there's a ironwood liner there holding it all together.
Yeah, I actually found one. It's with the brass pins, the brass bolsters from Blaze Show 2009.
Oh, do you have one?
No, I don't have one. I said I found the picture of it. I was trying to see what the horse looks like.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a very thin, about 50,000, 60,000, something like that, of ironwood that's sandwiched between the horse hoof and the steel. So there was a lot of R&D went into that crazy thing.
Yeah, I put a picture of that's that knife up in the group.
Yeah,
I mean in the Skype.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, and so you can see it has kind of interesting, color stripes and patterns, and yeah.
It looks good. I didn't think it'll look as good as it does, but I would never put in that much work.
I can see now why no one copied you.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I wanted to go through the turmoil.
It's like 7 extra steps there.
Yeah. Well, and then another cool thing about that, if you zoom in on it, you'll see on the blade, there's kind of like a jeweling. So that's like, instead of engine turning.
Yeah, it's like straight lines.
Yeah, it's straight lines. So we built a contraption that had X and Y travel, and you'd clamp the blade on it and have a guillotine of sandpaper, and then there was a cam and a crank, so you'd crank it and the table would zigzag back and forth, and they would put those that zigzag pattern into the blade, which gave a cool look because it was a lot like engine turning, but again it was all linear.
Yeah.
And then the sheath. The sheath had a lot of fucking work to it, Jesus. So that the braiding there, this picture doesn't have a good side view of it, but anyways, that's all rawhide lacing, and I think would it take you an hour and a half or something to lace?
Yeah, there's a lot going on there to do the braiding.
If you ever see one in person, it's a really complicated braid.
It's pretty much a full basket weave because like my dad does my sheath work, and he was a tailor, so he does something similar, but it's not that many layers to the braid. But yeah, even what he does it's less complex than this, and it also takes him about like 45 minutes to an hour. He's like, I hate these sheets.
Yeah, that's all done with one string. And so you start at the top, and then the weave down. It's an old cowboy thing. When I was a kid, I made a lot of horse gear out of rawhide, and I liked rawhide braiding and lacing and so on. And so I kind of borrowed from that to design the sheath.
But I just remember the fixture to drill all the holes, because all the holes have to be perfectly spaced, and then we had like diagrams and like there was like 3 or 4 sheaths that had like the first step, second step, and third step, so you could see how the braid was working.
Yeah, because I taught some other people
to teach people,
to lace them, and it's kind of hard to teach. But anyway, so I had one sheath that had the first step, and then the second step, third step, and so on, until you kind of could get the picture of what you do next until you get to the other end.
Now I'm still kind of like shocked that what you guys went through to get the hoofs, because 2009 is the year I got into this community, so I know what the market value for things were. So to estimate it, what did this knife cost in 2009?
Yeah, I think I started selling for about $450.
No, I think it was $350, but that was we were selling those in 1994, 1995.
Yeah.
Okay. The photo I'm looking at here says Blade Show. I don't know if that knife was from Blade Show 2009 or.
All right.
Because there's a photo that says 2009 Blade Show.
Yeah. No, we quit making that probably in '98 or something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I was about to say in 2005 for $2009 for $350, I wouldn't even just extract the hooves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't get rich on that knife. That's for sure.
Well, that's what made us start thinking about alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do away with natural materials.
Yeah, like G10.
Right.
Yeah.
And I made some dog locks that, because I still have horse hoof. I mean, we processed a lot of it.
You get flashbacks every time you see it. It's like, ugh.
Yeah. Oh, it was terrible. The smell is what was so bad. And I remember one time we used to have a fridge, an old fridge that it wasn't plugged in, but we'd put the vinegar in there and a little light bulb to keep the vinegar from freezing. And we would cycle the ones on the bottom up to the top, and we just keep going through it. And one bucket got stuck in the rotation or out of the rotation, And one day we were in the shop, and God, there was this god-awful smell. We could not figure it out. And finally, we realized that this bucket had been in there probably 6 or 7 months.
Oh, wow.
And it had just disintegrated everything. And so it was just bone and hoof and goop. And it was so terrible.
Like
So
almost glue at that point, right?
Yeah, it was just like
glue.
this goop with hair in it.
Oh,
Oh, man. That's,
It was horrible. Yeah.
So you hear that, kids? If you don't have hydrochloric acid, but you have 7 months, vinegar will do.
it'll do.
right.
It'll work.
That's what happened, actually. Ugh. So, even though the pony knife doesn't look that complicated, it doesn't look very innovative, there was a lot of innovation going in on that knife. Even the way we made the bolster, so the bolster has a slit all the way except, or it's like, I don't know, 3/4 of the way it's slit, so it slides over the knife, but where the tip of it is, it's all solid. But just the amount of fixturing to make all that was all pre-CNC. And so we just made, really complicated fixtures that we still have up in the attic somewhere, all the fixtures that we use to make the pony knife.
Wow.
So
you should do
another batch next year?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right.
What I'm hearing?
Yeah.
you should
Version
do a
2.
deadlock. Yeah, with one of those scales on it. There you go.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I could do an inlay with it or something.
Wait, now
Make it
does it
super
just
limited.
does it just look like that naturally, or did you have to stabilize it?
It looks like that naturally.
Oh,
Yeah,
But,
the
but you did
stabilizing is
stabilize
just to keep it from taking on moisture and warping.
Yeah, the stabilizing, we didn't add a dye to the stabilizing. We just, it was a clear, some type of epoxy or
Oh,
something.
yeah, that's what I meant. But you
Well,
guys,
it wasn't-
it's
it
not like
wasn't-
raw. You guys actually stabilized it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, otherwise it, we made a few that weren't stabilized, and they shrink and grow a little bit over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those natural materials on old knives, you can see it's all kind of like warped and they turn up on themselves and stuff.
yeah, and that's what was happening. So we had to stabilize it.
That's cool. I didn't know you could just like stabilize like random goods like that.
Well, it's porous enough when it's dry. And you got and drying is a big thing too. We had to dry them for months, literally, in the clamped up in the racks that I was talking about earlier. And so it had to be completely dry. But once it's dry, it's also somewhat porous. And so the stabilizing process is embedding it in a liquid polymer. And using both pressure and then vacuum is the process they used at K&G. And that sucks the material, the polymer, all the way through all of the pores and all the little cavities in the horse hoof. And then when that sets up, well, then all that space is filled and that stabilizes the whole thing.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, so 0 air pockets in there. It's all filled with
Right.
epoxy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, stabilize is fun. I used to do wood stabilizing when I made kitchen knives. Just suck it up, come back, and you have a block that weighs 5 times more than it did before.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it does weigh more, right? Yeah, it's heavier. But the horse
far
hoof
out.
made an interesting handle because and we tried to choose, and we told the guys at the rendering plant what we're looking for, but we liked hooves that had streaks in them, color. Some hooves are mostly white and some are mostly black, but we liked the kind that would have stripes in them so you could get some coloration, you know.
Yeah, some interesting looking ones like that.
Yeah, well, and it distinguishes it from sheep horn, which is the thing it looks the most like.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like sheep horn in an awful lot of ways, except for that differential coloring.
Yeah, it's not surprising that someone hasn't copied.
Yeah, I don't know why they haven't picked
Point.
up on that.
Yeah, well, maybe now they've listened to this, they might
Yeah, I don't know.
decide
Cats
to
on the
go
back.
try it.
Oh,
Oh god.
if only you could come across some Horfos, that's then
Yeah.
dinner all set.
I should
honestly,
start selling it.
I think about Matt, and he makes carbon fiber. I'm like,
Yeah.
I grind one carbon fiber scale. I'm like, it's a shitty job is to work and cut carbon fiber all day.
Yeah.
You feel
Like
better now?
what scale? I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I found the material is probably worse to actually make.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
that bad in comparison. All right.
Yeah, we were at a Haas show the other day, kicking the tires on machines, and one of the girls there had was familiar with a pony knife and was teasing it about it, and I said something like, "Well, yeah, that's people ask us why all the horses in our neighborhood are up on blocks."
That's right.
There's something missing. I just can't put my finger on it.
Yeah.
Come to think of it, there aren't any cinder blocks available either. So, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I missed the Haas show because the Haas show by me is always during Blade show.
Oh.
Well, so I've been missing it for the last like 5 years, ever since I got my house. I'm trying to go because I want to see some of the new stuff they have because other companies come to their show.
Right.
Yeah.
At least by you, I guess same thing.
Yeah, not a whole. I mean, they've got like Sodic and Star Lathe, and that's about it. No other mills come.
No mills, but like a lot of work holding companies come and software
Yes.
companies and stuff like
That's
that.
right.
I like to go because like those work holding things, like there's things you don't even know about, and then you see it at a trade show, you're like, oh, that would have solved so many issues I had if I only knew
Yeah,
about
I really want to. I want to go to the IMTS show.
it. Yeah, I was gonna go this past one, but I couldn't make it. It's a very expensive trip.
Is that the one in Chicago?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's bi-yearly, but like a flight there is expensive, and the hotels in that area are really expensive. Like, everyone tells me it's a very expensive show.
Yeah, they have one in Chicago and then one in LA, I think.
That's a different type, but IMTS is like the biggest in the world.
Oh, I thought IMTS was both, but maybe. Maybe I'm
That's the one
thinking
in
of a
Chicago.
different one.
It's like 3 buildings and multiple floors. From what people were telling me, they're telling me like you're not gonna make the whole show. It's like you have
Yeah.
to know their way to plan. Like, oh, I'm here to buy a tumbler. I got to go talk to all the tumbler companies, and it's all categorized.
Right.
Even bigger than Chacho.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
to get a booth there, it's like millions of dollars.
Really?
Yep.
It's
I have a question about the Deadlock. You guys, the finish on the Deadlock. Why so few?
Few options.
Yeah, like I mean I understand the process, but no real diversity in finishes. Is that just a stylistic choice, or does it have to do with the process?
It's more about just trying to get them out the door. So if I start adding a whole bunch more options, then my quantity goes way down. Because now I'm processing different materials and my volume's less when I buy. Each material has a different finishing process. So we'll probably start adding some higher end options, either all Damascus or some Mokutai, and things like that. But
Yeah, that's down the line at this point.
it's just down the line at this point. Right now,
Okay.
I'm just trying to focus on the processes and trying to get knives out the door.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So if you're looking
Because-
for a dressed up Deadlock, just keep waiting.
Yeah,
That's
hang
rough.
tight, and eventually we'll have more Damascus blades, and probably some all Damasteel type stuff. But anytime if I set up and cut titanium, so all the tools are set up for cutting titanium, all the speeds and feeds, everything. And so then if I switch to carbon fiber, now all the tools have to be changed out to tools for carbon fiber. If I do Damascus, now all the tools are swapped out for cutting steel. So it's, and every time you do that, you add another, material. It's just a whole nother layer of complication and delays and less knives go out the door. And I already get enough angry emails from people that can't get deadlocks that I think it's best I just focus on getting deadlocks out the door.
Yeah, I feel you with the tool change. Like I found a solution for that. Thankfully, finally, it just get a bigger tool holder, and then you get both.
Right.
Like
Well, but
jumping between
like
steel and titanium all the time.
right now, I'm making the frames on the Deadlock, and I have 20 tools to cut the frames.
I need 20.
Wow.
And so,
All right.
and I've got a tool holder that holds 30, but still, I mean, it doesn't. I'd have to have 50 or more to be able to even make the frames out of a different material. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to get a machine with 20 because I do batch work, so I'll cut 40 blades, 40 handles. But
Right.
now with employees, that's not working the best for cash flow.
Right.
So I need a 20 tool changer so I can do sets, so I can do steel and tie at least at the same time.
Yep.
And then the second thing you were saying about people are like sending you angry emails, I always say the knife industry. There's only one other industry that I could think of that's similar is like the alcohol industry. People get mad at you when you don't want to take their money.
Yes.
Yeah.
We get that sometimes. Like, why can't you just take my money now? I don't want to wait for the drop. Just, I'll give you money now. I'll send it pay in full. I'll pay more. I'll
Wait longer.
Can I pay up front? I'm like,
Yeah.
if you pay me up front, you're gonna wait 3 times as long.
Yeah, we get all sorts of people trying to do that all the time, and so I'm pretty stern about it.
Like I'm not complaining. It's a great issue to have.
Yeah,
It
that's
just
not terrible.
It's like the only thing I can think of is alcohol after closing hour. It's like
The other show I was thinking about was West Tech.
oh, okay.
That's the one in Long Beach, I guess.
Oh, maybe I could do that one actually. I have family there. I just want to do like a big machining show, except the local, because like we have Allendale and Haas is in there, so when they do their demo day, a lot of companies come. It's a pretty big event. Not pretty big, but like it's the only decent sized one we have around here. Because I want to go talk to them about some options about a new machine. Cause I'm really interested in getting, because I have height issues in my ceiling, so like I can't get a Haas with a side mount tool changer.
Oh,
Yeah, I
That's
watched one guy try to take his off and put it back on in his garage, and it was a nightmare. Because like I can get it inside the shop, but there's like I-beams and stuff, and I can't get it past the I-beams. So it'd have to be like right by my entrance. I don't want to do that.
Not enough space, dude.
Yeah.
Gotta
Whatever.
get one of those room stretching tools to start with.
One of them room stretchers.
Yeah.
Them ceiling
Get your dad on
expanders.
that.
Yeah,
Heck.
ceiling expanders, room stretchers,
Mm-hmm.
door thingamajiggies.
I'm looking at a Deadlock here. It's like black crinkle coat looking. Is that a coating or is that a finish?
a black crinkle coating.
Like,
It's a crinkle coat.
The crinkle coat. You haven't used that
Classic.
before?
Classic one.
It's it's probably just a real aggressive tumbling, and it looks dark.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's from the pre-order photos.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, now you
it's
mentioned
just a
tumble. It kind of
dark-
looks like a tumble. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a tumbled finish.
Yeah, black crinkle coat.
I thought it
Yeah,
was
the
like
black-
camera spray paint, but like
No.
some sort of powder coat or Cerakote.
It's bed liner, Nick. Get over it, okay, man. Jesus. I don't know if you wanted to say, but I wanted to ask, what was the final count on the revolutions of fire and close on the Deadlock currently, if you wanted to say?
Yeah, I wrote it down. So off the top of my head, I think it was 200,000. It was close to that.
Okay, so looking at, that's a lot. 200,000 is, but I mean, essentially customers just sit there and do that. They just fire the knife until it explodes.
I just got tired of because I could only do 10,000 cycles a day. And I just got tired of listening to the machine run because not only had I ran it for that 200,000, I had ran it for months and months and months. It'd run it and then fail, and then redesign, run it and fail, redesign, change configurations, and test this coating versus that coating, and this material and that material. So the machine was wearing out. I had to replace parts on the machine because it had cycled so many times. And so my goal was 100,000, and then after I made it past that, it was exciting. And then by the time we got to 200,000 cycles, I was like, okay, we're good.
It works. It's
It works.
sufficient.
Good.
How many cycles?
That's
200,000.
200,000. Wow. How long did that
You
take?
had to make that $250,000 though.
Yeah. So it was 10,000. So it was. Would that be 20 days? No.
Damn.
Mhm.
Yeah, 20 days.
Of
'Cause
just
we can only do
constant firing.
of
pretty
constant
extreme.
firing. Open, close. Open, close.
Pretty quick or like pretty steady?
It's about that pace.
Yeah.
I feel like I saw
okay.
a video of it a while back.
I
It's like
did
once every second, kind of.
Yeah, the full cycle of open and close is probably 4 seconds.
Yeah, you have to let the
Faster than that, I think.
Is it faster than that?
rest
Yeah.
for a minute.
No, it was just the way it was designed. There is a video on my Instagram where I show the machine opening and closing.
Oh yeah.
And
So it's like give or take like close to like 58 hours or something like that,
Hmm.
which is pretty insane.
maybe. I know that. So we could get 10,000 cycles in a day, but that wasn't a 12-hour day. That was probably an 8-hour day.
Okay.
Quite a
and
long.
And I wouldn't run it at night because if it failed, I wanted to be there and watch it. I wanted to see when it failed. And so we had 2 counters on it. One counter that would measure if it actually opened and closed, and then one counter on how many times the machine thought it was opening and closing it.
Gotcha. Huh. Pretty insane.
You talking about misfires?
Yeah, so
Or
if
just-
it misfired, I could see if there was a difference between the 2 measurements.
Okay. I gotcha.
And then, like, because sometimes what would happen is, depending on the material, it would start to get sticky after so many cycles. And so I could come in and I could see, oh, okay, so it's... and the machine was built to have a little bit of give to it so it wouldn't break. So if it got a little sticky, it wouldn't close it or it wouldn't fire it open. But then it might do it on the next cycle. And so it would skip cycles once in a while. So anyways, by having the 2 counters, I could tell if I was in sync with opening and closing and not sticking.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's that extra step.
Yeah, we put a lot of time in the R&D on that Deadlock.
What did R&D stand for again?
Yeah, I was about to ask
Wreck
that.
and destroy.
Wreck and destroy.
That's right. Okay. Wreck and destroy. That's great. That's very
Make
cool.
T-shirts.
Yeah,
Yeah, hot knives, wreck and destroy. Yeah.
That's not a bad idea. I
Could
like
be,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, R&D. Hell yeah.
Just R&D till it works.
Hello, this is Philip with Bladeology Tech Support. At this time, Levon hijacked Elijah's feed.
Hello, Levon.
Hi.
How you
Hi.
doing?
How do you just crash our podcast
Yeah,
and have
how
technical difficulties?
Yeah, what's going on?
Oh, I don't know. I just figured. I guess you guys needed a veteran to come in here and show you how things are done.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, you sure did that.
Well, take over the show, Lon.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't used Skype in about a decade, so here we are. So who do we have in here? Is the whole crew in here? And
Yeah, the whole
Gavin?
crew's here.
Yeah,
Oh, somebody added
Gavin's
you. That's
here.
how you got in here.
Grant too.
Oh, hi.
Grant's here. We were just talking about your copper pipes and how magnificent they are.
Mhm.
I figured that would come up.
It has to. That's probably the memory I always think of when I think of you, Levon. So I was
Wow,
at
that's
Levon's
great.
house.
Not
And
the doorknobs.
That comes up too. Yeah. But so Levon's showing me his house, which is a cool house, and it's got cool doorknobs, and it's made in like the 1800s or something. And the thing that he's most proud of
Oh, you stop it now.
is down in the basement. There's a whole bunch of copper pipes that somebody's sweat together. It looks like every house that has copper pipes. And he comes out, he has a curtain in front of it, and he prepares everybody. And he says, okay, here it is. And he pulls the curtain back, and it's just a bunch of copper pipes. Go to a hot water heater or something.
I have yet to see this. I need to. I need to go downstairs and look at this.
You've been sleeping in front of them the whole time you've been here.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah,
Is that how that works?
Yeah.
that's what that weird red, like room back there is.
Yes, that's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
It's dramatically lit now, Gavin.
Is it?
Incredibly.
I believe
Yes.
it. Well, and it was funny because Levon was so excited, and I was like, "Oh, that's great, Levon! Wow,
Mm.
very
Got some copper pipes right there.
Those are
man.
some copper pipes. Copper pipes
Yeah.
can be, shiny and made
Look.
of copper.
You know, somebody out there would love to get their hands on those copper pipes. Just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
For
bring them by
materials
my
or what?
shop. They won't last 2 seconds.
they scrap them. So
Yeah.
what else have you been talking about besides
A whole wealth of things
drug
on the
dealer-
podcast here.
Mostly just your doorknobs and your copper pipes.
Yeah.
Wow.
about the guy that sold his prototype Deadlock."
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
that
that's
was
right.
me.
You sold it. didn't
Traitorous.
you? Yeah.
I did, and I need another one.
Well, you can't sell the second one. You got to hold on
I
to
would-
it.
Well, no, I wouldn't sell the second one.
Oh, okay.
The reason I had to let the prototype go is because it was a prototype, and I never carried it.
Right.
But the Deadlock is one of my favorite knives of all time.
Well, thank you.
Cool.
Mhm. Just
Mhm.
It's a good thing.
Are you sure that the Mantis Cyclops isn't your favorite knife of all time?
We don't bring up the Mantis Cyclops.
Wow.
Yeah, that's funny. We've totally did.
Oh, the vicious circle.
The vicious circle or the
The vicious
Cyclops.
The,
Yeah.
the
Boggle
custom
Those
versions
are,
of that. The custom versions of that thing were awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
the
sent out a
custom
bunch to different makers, right? And they all put their spin on the circle, so to speak.
Yeah. So we made we called it the ring knife. And
Doesn't have a ring to it.
yeah, not like Vicious does.
Right.
So yeah, we started making customs of those, and then the custom or the front plates I would leave blank, and I'd send them out in a set of 3 to different knife makers, and then they would finish the front in their own style. And
Huh.
so we had maybe 12 different knife makers. Like Toshi did a set, Lee Williams, Jeremy Marsh, Rudy Lala.
I'm actually watching the video, but it's on mute. So
Yeah.
now I'm trying to look over these again and guess who did what.
Yeah.
Well, you said Marsh and Tashi, so I'm sold.
Yeah, they both did really cool ones.
Yeah.
Oh, and then at the end of that 2012 Blade Show video, you bring out another one of those a dagger with the lever mechanism, the cat mechanism, except with different color G10. So I don't know if it's a whole nother knife or not.
Really? I probably just had different handles that I was putting
Oh,
on.
because it was Black G10 before, and now it's Desert 10. So that's us.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
But yeah, so that was kind of fun. That was a fun project. I liked that.
That might be a good one to resurrect pretty soon. I think there's a lot of traction for stuff like that.
You're right,
The-
Levon, but deadlocks.
Yeah, deadlocks.
Mhm.
You mean the concept of having other people finish them, or the ring knife itself?
The ring itself. The ring knife
Yeah.
itself.
I'd say probably both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably both. I know I do a steep business with those out of the front of the house, in the store, actually.
I'm sure.
The
Yeah.
vicious
Mantis
circles?
Is Mantis
Oh, wow.
still a thing, or is it a clone?
No,
it's still a thing.
Mantis.
Yeah,
Oh.
and they're making another batch. They had a lot of problems with. They had the vicious circles, or no, sorry, the Cyclops, which those were always pretty poor quality and not well made at all. And
You
then
had a bunch of different variants of those too, with like Mother of Pearl and stuff like that.
so that's the vicious circle. So then
Vicious circle.
Then we moved to the vicious circle, which was a little bit smaller, much better quality, and then it had the different inlays and things. But then, as Mantis changed ownership or leadership, we started using a new factory, And then that factory decided they didn't want to make them anymore because it was too hard. And now there's a new factory that's making them, and they had some problems, so they had to be sent back. And so we're waiting now on a shipment that I think is going to be landing any moment now.
Can I just say that Mantis sounds more like a huge criminal organization than it does a knife manufacturer? That should have been a clue.
Yeah.
You know, one thing the Mantis that we didn't talk about was the gearhead.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah, and the gearhead's pretty new, and they did a good job on that as well.
Hey, you showed it to us in January in Vegas. It was pretty neat.
I actually had somebody, I was like, put up on Instagram, asked me some questions. And one of the questions was, am I going to do a design with a Hawk Knives lock on it? And they're like, oh, did you also see the Mantis gearhead?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I did see that.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even got to touch the gearhead yet. I thought that thing looked pretty cool.
It's pretty awesome. I mean, it's like unlike anything else, mechanism-wise.
Yeah, once you get the hang of it, because it's a little weird in the beginning, it has a high fidget factor, and you get to watch the gears move around. So it's great when
You
you're
just
stoned.
push down that lever, and it just kind of opens it up.
It's funny.
I think speaking of that, the Hawk Lock is probably one of the most underutilized things in the knife industry right now, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to come out with more Hawk locks. And you missed the beginning of this conversation, Levon.
That's true.
But
You probably talked about
our life is kind of taken up with deadlocks these days, so it's been tough for us to get away from that. But someday it'd be nice to go back to making more Hawk locks and coming up with new mechanisms and going in those directions. But on the gearhead, so we made that. How many years ago? Probably
10 plus.
15 years ago we came up with that design.
Maybe.
So that was another design that we came up with for Kershaw. It was back when the Orange County chopper license was up for grabs in the knife industry, and then Kershaw got it for a little bit, and they asked us to design a knife for the Orange County we've been talking too long. The
Orange County choppers?
No, just OCC.
Oh.
Yeah, OCC. We haven't been talking for like over 2 hours, but it's good. It's great.
And so they asked us to design something for that line, and that was the gearhead. And they loved it. They thought it was great, but ultimately it was too complicated for them to manufacture, and so it kind of got shelved. And then we actually showed it to Mantis maybe 8 years ago, and they loved it, and we just kept putting it off. And anyways, here we are now. It's finally made and hit the market.
Very cool.
Oh, pretty awesome.
So for Deadlock batches, you just did a batch. If you didn't get on that batch, that sucks. There may be more available. Or but you're planning on putting the Deadlock through its paces. Will there be another batch drop at some point in the future?
Yes. Okay. So we're this batch we're hoping will be finished in maybe 5 months or less.
Okay.
And so some point before the batch is done, we'll probably open things up again. I'm probably going to sneak in some fancier ones during this batch. So we'll have some Damasteel versions, some Timascus stuff. I haven't really made a final decision on what yet, but I'll just be kind of sliding those in as I fulfill this batch.
Yeah, like show knives or something.
Yeah, we'll have show knives, and then I'll just do like a drop. So I'll just get 10 or 15 Damasteel versions all done, and then just do a drop in between while doing this batch.
Oh, that's cool. That's something that people can look forward to.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, how do they know about the things that are happening with the Deadlock?
So all Deadlock sales are done through our newsletter. So you have to go to our site, sign up for the newsletter, and then we just blast out information through that. Generally, we'll put something on the website afterwards. We might do a post on Instagram, but to be the first to know what's going on, you have to be on the newsletter.
Okay, so newsletters really, that's the best way to know what's happening with y'all and where these knives are. And once in a while, I do see you guys have an awesome program, which I wish more people did. I feel like makers used to do it more, but if someone has a Deadlock they want to sell, they can go through you, which is neat because then, it's like an official, everything's legit. It's a tuned up, beautiful Deadlock. So if you're on the newsletter, that's another great way to get a chance to get your hands on one.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll send the knife into us. We'll inspect it, make sure it's good. If it has issues, we'll fix them, do a spa treatment to it, and then we'll facilitate the sale, put it on our newsletter, and sell it that way.
Yeah, that's pretty legit.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. And then obviously email, contact information, all that good business is on the website. But just the same, what's a good email for you if someone absolutely had to reach out?
Yeah. So email blademaker25@msn.com. The website is hawkknifedesigns.com. You can also go to deadlockotf.com, which will direct you to our site. And then, all the information's there. Then you can reach out to us, email us. I do prefer emails because then India can answer them for me.
There you go.
But if you send me a Facebook message or an Instagram message, I don't always get those right away. And I forget to write people back sometimes. So email is the best way. Also, if I need to remember a conversation or I always search my emails first. So that's a better way for me to organize information.
I hear you. I love email. Email all the way. India is super fast with the responses. Anytime I've ever reached out on that email, she fires right back.
Except when it's during a drop. I think we had about 1,000 emails this last drop. So it took a while to get through all of that.
1,000? Damn.
That's a few.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Some of it, and so it wasn't all customers, but a lot of it is, it generates an order, and then it generates a credit card processing thing, and then 2 or 3 emails from a customer, did I really get one? I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of emails that happen after drops.
Yeah. Cool. So email, check out the social medias. Hopefully, I know you guys are busy. We do like to have makers back on once in a while to tell cool stories and chat. Hopefully you guys can do that in the future once things settle down a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
What's your guys' show schedule look like for the rest of the year and next year?
So we're going to USN in a couple weeks, and I'll have 6 knives, and they're a little bit different. We've been playing around with some heat coloring in the oven.
Oh, nice. So
the colors are more consistent, whereas with the flame, you get kind of the rainbow iridescent looks. So I'll have a few with the new solid colors out of the oven. We'll also have one knife that we're auctioning off for knife rights. So all the proceeds will go to knife rights. So that'll be cool. And then after that, we might go to Blade Show West.
You should make it, man. You should come out there. It's a fun time. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been tossing that around. So we haven't reached out to them and got a table or anything yet, but I figured we'd just wait till the last minute and call them and see if they'll allow us to.
Oh, I'm sure they'll be cool with that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the plan. Just wait till the last minute, see if we have any knives.
Yeah.
It's even this show, the USN show. It's a little tough because I don't really have the knives. So I'm just kind of pulling them from customers' orders, which I hate to do, but I also hate just canceling the show. So we do have other knives coming along, so it won't take too long to replace the customers' orders.
Replenish the
Yeah.
The batch.
But
The
that's
supply.
essentially what we'd have to do when we do Blade Show. So
Yeah.
I'll just kind of feel it out and see how orders are going and where we're at on things. And then, of course, we'll be at SHOT Show. But that's more of just a show for us, just to walk around and see what everybody's doing in the industry. And then
Yeah, get an eye for what's going on.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
Blade Show.
Cool.
Wow. All right.
That's
Right
it.
on.
Back in
As far as
Atlanta.
we're at.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess we'll all see you here in a few weeks. Or like,
Yep.
man, it's coming down to like 1 week. I guess.
No.
Well,
it's
2
not.
weeks.
No,
Yeah, it's 2
2
weeks.
2 weeks. You're gonna make
For me, it's
get
1
ahead
week.
of ourselves right now.
Yeah.
For me, it's 1
I-
week because
yeah.
I had to Vegas a week early. But
Okay. I was about to cancel this podcast and go back to work.
yeah, I was like, oh wait a second. Yeah, it is 2 weeks.
I got stuff
It's
to
like
do.
2.5 weeks.
Yeah, I'm like, no, I'm starting 9 Knives tomorrow. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I need 2 weeks.
On Nick's schedule, it's still a month, so don't worry
It's,
about it.
Yeah,
it's
it's a
like
month-
3
it's a
months
month out.
away.
Yeah,
I'll be
3
fine.
months. Yeah, don't worry about it. Very cool. Well, we'll all be in Vegas, so that'll be cool. Unless I'm forgetting something, I'm gonna say that it's been awesome of you guys to take some time and be on the cast with us and chat and talk trash.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we do the end roll?
Yeah, not that I can think
Yeah,
of.
I don't know. We'll think of something later.
Yeah, as
probably.
soon as we're done, we'll think about it.
Yeah.
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 So this was
Well,
time
there'll be
recording.
more to come. So we'll save something for next time.
There you go. That's the spirit.
Part 2, everybody.
Cool.
Okay. Well, on that note, Nick Truprin of NCC Knives out. You could find me at nccknives.com, NCC Knives on Instagram, or nccKnives@yahoo.com.
Elijah Isham of Isham Blade Works. You can find me at Isham Blade Works on Instagram, ishambladeworks@gmail.com, and pretty much at any knife show. So
I'm Jeremiah Burbank. I'm going to sign off. You can find me at the day job, PVK Vegas, on Instagram. And yeah, that's a good spot for it. Thanks.
good night, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you.
All right.